Are you ready to be the change? If so, you've come to the right place. You are about to join a movement of entrepreneurs who are empowering people, saving the planet, and turning their passion into profits while creating the lifestyle of their dreams. If you don't believe us, check out our website at entrepreneursforachange.com, a place where you can be inspired, mentored, and supported by a tribe of change-making entrepreneurs just like you. Now, before diving into the interview, I want to encourage you to rate, review, and download Entrepreneurs for a Change on iTunes. This really helps us reach more people with inspiring stories of entrepreneurs who are changing the world. Also, if these stories inspire you to start a world-changing business of your own, head over to our website at entrepreneursforachange.com and download the Business Changemakers Toolkit to get a jumpstart today. Now on to the show. Hello, amazing changemakers. This is Lorna Lee, and welcome to episode 57 of Entrepreneurs for a Change, where we are joined today by Bari Tessler, who is a financial therapist, a mentor coach, who is the founder of The Art of Money, which is a 1-year online money school that has trained thousands of people to embrace new, empowered, and refreshingly honest relationships with money through Bari's unique, nurturing, body-centered approach to financial well-being. So the topic for today is the art of mastering money with your honey. Because what I can say for many entrepreneurs, being on the journey of entrepreneurship involves taking risks, especially personal financial risks that will impact your family. I have heard and read so many stories. Indeed, a colleague of mine from my previous job who left to do his own startup shared a soul-bearing post where he had to essentially keep downgrading their living expenses, and which, patiently was borne by his wife and his children as he sank more and more of his personal money to grow his startup. And it was a very difficult journey for him. And so Bari's going to share with us her experience that she draws from, her master's in Somatic Psychology from Naropa University, and her, methodology that she's cultivated over many years as a mentor to, others who are trying to master a soulful approach to their relationship with money. She's going to share with us how you have these difficult conversations with your partner so that you and your partner are on the same financial team. So, Bari, thank you so much for joining us on this show. I'd love to hear more about who you are and how you got started on this really interesting path of becoming a financial therapist.
Sure. It's my pleasure to be here. It's really nice to meet you live, finally. Okay. So, I knew early on I was either going to be a dancer, a businesswoman, or a psychotherapist. That was it. So I went to graduate school to be a psychotherapist, and a body-centered one. So it integrated the dance, the movement, the body-centered approach, right? And for me, that whole journey in my 20s was wonderful. Becoming a psychotherapist at Naropa University, which you have to be your own case study. And which I love, because I feel that's the only true way to become a therapist is to do your own work, right? And so I was on that path, and we studied every single topic under the sun. Everything: body, food, intimacy, relationships, God, spirituality, sexuality, sensuality, and on and on and on. And I left graduate school, and the student loan came due. And that was my moment. That was my, wait a second. We never spoke about money. We never had a class, a topic, themes, questions. So I left graduate school having no idea how to start my own private practice, do the bookkeeping and all of that, and really mostly sit with my clients, sit with my couple clients. Because as they say, money is the main reason why people get divorced. And, that's not really true. It's always what's underneath the surface. What does money mean to all of us? What's our relationship to money? What do we project onto money? We're going to talk about that. But for me, it was such an obvious moment that this was a huge missing piece in my education from grade school on up in small increments. And I looked around and realized, well, of course, I'm not the only person. This is a missing piece in most of our education, and not just in graduate school, but in undergrad and high school and, and so on. So it became so clear to me that either I was literally going to run away and not pay off the student loan. I'd like to present myself with options. So I presented myself with all the options.
Default, declare bankruptcy, I give up, throw in the towel.
Exactly. I presented many different options. And then the one that felt the most right was to face it head on and to learn every single thing that I could about money from the ground on up, on a practical level, on an emotional level, psychological level, spiritual level. I just dove in and I started learning bookkeeping. And I mean, this was after a whole decade of being a body-centered therapist, working in the mental health field, having many social work type of jobs, leading lots of authentic movement groups, working in hospice. And then I just needed a bridge. I needed to learn all the practical tools and systems that I was never taught, that as a creative person, I was terrified of, or really, I was scared of, but I also thought was just so boring and dry. And I don't want to have anything to do with that part of life or business, and they were all bad words, marketing and bookkeeping, and it was all bad words for me, way back in the day as I was on a psycho-spiritual path at Naropa, training to be and becoming a therapist. So it just became so clear that this was my next step. Everyone around me thought I was taking an odd detour. Everyone around me thought this is just a weird stepping stone. And I knew it was the right thing. I wound up having a bookkeeping practice. And then at some point I met a mentor, a woman named Tamara Slayton. And she's not in her body anymore, but she's still very much around. And she was there at a really key moment when I was trying to integrate all the deep psychotherapy work and being able to hold space for people when we go into all these deep life experiences and emotions, and using our body and movement and sound to help us get through all these places. And with all these tools and systems and bookkeeping systems and money management pieces that I surprisingly fell in love with. I really, really, really surprised myself. And so as I was putting this all together, I remember my mentor said, it's time for you to teach. It's time for you to put together a talk. And so I went out into the woods and I basically said, okay, what am I supposed to bring back to my community? What are the concepts? What are the phrases? What's the framework of a beginning methodology? Like, please, trees, God, spirit, tell me. And I got some information and came back, and me and my husband put it on big white pieces of paper, and we got the main 3 phases, the 3 doorways, which I now call money healing, money practices, and money maps. So we got the foundation of that 14 years ago, and he started calling it financial therapy because he's always been my namer. So, he came up with the art of money. He came up with financial therapy. 14 years ago, there was just a few of us that was starting to use that title and that word to describe what we were doing.
This is a perfect example of creating your own career or profession, because, when, let's say you're a college student just, graduating, the list of job opportunities, they may include bookkeeper, they may include accountant, but certainly financial therapist is not on that list. So I think it's a wonderful thing that you found this calling and you were able to parlay it into a business. So that's this is a great example that you can indeed create your own career if you're able to find that unmet need, which is, very much, helping people come into a right relationship with money. Because, it's one thing to get an accountant and, have the person do your taxes and, whatnot. But, for most of us, I think there is a very intimate relationship that we have with money, especially the story that we have around it. So I'm kind of curious to know, who are the people that come to you for help, and why do they come to you to seek financial therapy?
Yeah. So, I work with a lot of women, and I work with a lot of couples, and I work with a lot of creative entrepreneurs. So I know that's like a wide brushstroke, but that's who I work with. And, folks for years have said, you need to find your niche. And I'm like, my niche is financial therapy. It's folks that are on a conscious path or on some kind of psycho-spiritual path. They've done so much work on themselves in every area of their life. And money's the last frontier. Money's really the last frontier to look at and to really uncover and to really understand and to have a healthy relationship with. So folks that come to me are all different income levels, from really someone who has a nonprofit job for $50,000 and is so happy living in San Francisco to someone who runs their own business and they're making 500,000 to someone who's making, a family who's making 250,000 to folks who have family money and inheritance. So the income spectrum is much bigger than that on both ends of it. But it's really folks who have done who've done a lot of work on themselves. And this is the last frontier. And it's folks that, I have a lot of high earners that come to me and they're great at bringing in the money because from my experience, everyone has a lot of strengths around money and everyone has challenges. So when we're really starting to get into the money story, which is one of the first stops that I go to, and even before that, I always like to acknowledge that most of us have a level of money shame. So that's what I've seen over the years, that people who come to me, again, no matter if they're high earners, that's their strength. So their challenge may be that they have a heck of a time really shaping and directing and mapping out and planning. And the word budget is not one of my favorite words. I like to rename everything. Everything. So budget could be map of intention. Budget can be money map. So when I first started doing this work 14 years ago, one of the first things I realized is we need to incorporate our values. We need to incorporate our values even in the way we name things. So a budget, rename it. Rename your expense categories. So I'll give you an example. Recently, I even renamed my taxes to community contribution because the energy around paying those taxes did not feel good. And I still was having some around paying taxes. So I had to sit down with myself and me and my husband had a conversation of really what does this money go towards? The good parts of it, and we just had a huge flood in Boulder. So we had a lot of people coming out to actually help save people, and like helicopter people out from parts of where we were living. So we renamed this category community contribution. I have people rename all of their expense categories and their income categories. And that's one really fun way. So to come back to what I was even saying at the beginning is that most folks come to me with some level of shame. They feel like they have matured and become adults in most area of their lives. Like they've done the work, they've developed. And when it comes to money, they still feel like a teenager or they still feel like an infant or a toddler. I get that all the time. So many folks that are coming to me are wanting to have a healthy relationship to money, have a mature adult relationship to money for the first time in their lives. So when they're coming to me, there's some level of shame that's still there of, I don't do money well, or I do money far worse than everyone else on this planet, or there's such a mess here. There's just a level of, I don't know how to do this, instead of, we were simply not taught how to do this from grade school and up in small increments. We weren't taught how to have an emotional relationship to money. And most of us, if we look at a spectrum, we feel everything from anxiety around money to full-on anger, really pissed every time we have to sit down and pay bills and take care of this aspect of our lives. We feel sad. We feel like we want to fall asleep because this is so boring, to all the good parts of, there's really good things I get to do with money, and money's really just energy, or it's just an exchange, or how can I make my dreams come true by creating a wonderful livelihood? Like there's such a spectrum here, right, of what we experience. And money is really something that we project so much onto. So it's so important in my world to understand what's the money story. What are the patterns? We're all coming in with strengths and we're all coming in with challenges. And to really understand, first stop, what's the money story? What's the money shame? Or to even take off that cloak and just to get in there and to start pulling it apart. It feels like this monster, this ball of threads that we need to just pull apart and name it first. What are all the different threads? What are my strengths around money? What are my challenges? What did I learn from my family of origin? That's wonderful. What did I learn from my family of origin that's really unconscious that I'm still continuing today, that's not serving me? What's my relationship to earning money and saving money and giving money and spending money? And I'm just taking you through a little bit of even the beginning phase that I take people through, which is more of the money healing work. And then we get into all the practical components too. So I'm kind of answering your question. I'm getting to it, of who comes to me. It's folks that want more clarity around their numbers. So half my folks have no idea of actually how much is coming in and what's going out. Right?
Yeah, that can be a little scary to look at too, because I know from an entrepreneurial perspective, it's way more fun to focus on what you are being an entrepreneur doing rather than what's underneath all your business operations, which is cash flow. And sometimes it can be really daunting. I know I go through phases where I'm like, okay, I have a feeling I've got way too much on auto pay, and I'm kind of afraid to look at it all right now and go through the process of like unsubscribing and then trying to figure out, do I need this? Do I need this? Da-da-da. But it's interesting how you described all the different aspects of the money story. It's not necessarily just a simple statement like what I see very commonly in the conscious business community, which is the story that money is evil.
Yeah.
That's a very common one. But, again, going down into the different layers, there's, the inherited story. There's your relationship with money that you spend, your relationship with money that's coming in, inherited, and your relationship with your partner and the money story between the two of you. So I'm kind of curious because this is a really important topic for entrepreneurs, especially if you are in a marriage or a relationship where both parties are entrepreneurs. How do you begin to develop a healthy conversation with your beloved around the very scary topic of money? Especially, if both people are entrepreneurs and you're kind of like taking risks at as partners, or if one person is having to be, I guess, experience the brunt of your entrepreneurial decisions, which can be even more challenging.
Okay, so you're naming, we're touching on personal finances, we're touching on couple finances, and we're touching on entrepreneurial finances, and they all, at the end of the day, need to be talking to each other. I see some folks who track all their business stuff, but would never look at their personal. I have other folks that look at their personal finances, but are terrified to look at their business. So to address exactly what you're, starting to talk about is that for me, that's what I live. Me and my husband are both entrepreneurs, and we're a family-run business at this point. The Art of Money, my husband came on my team just a year ago, but that was because my entire team fell apart right as we were going into a launch for a year-long program, The Art of Money. Now, my husband's also been an entrepreneur and has had his own businesses, tech husband. He's been a part of startups.
Oh, you have a tech husband. I want a tech husband.
I know.
Like, honey, can you just fix my website, please? Thank you.
For our 10th year our 10th year anniversary, I got a new website. I got all of my programs put into Infusionsoft.
Oh, that's so romantic.
That's what I wanted. But that's such an entrepreneurial thing. I don't care about the diamond ring. I actually want a new website.
Infusionsoft, help me deal with Infusionsoft, please.
Yeah, 3 years ago, he did all of that for me. So there's so many pieces here. So I want to start from the beginning, and then I can talk about, I want to do a little piece about couples and money, okay? And then we can add in the entrepreneurial piece.
Okay.
Because to start out first with couples and money, two people come together, and they each, even if, let's say, they both come from wealthy families, which is usually not the case, but even if they came from both inheritance families or both middle-class families or both working class, or you come together and the way you interpreted your family, plus your nature, plus your Enneagram, plus, all the above, makes it so the way that you translate and interpret and project onto money is completely different. So two people have two completely individual money stories. And then you come together and usually you polarize. For the most part, couples, usually one person really worries about money all the time and likes to track everything because they like to be in control. The other person likes to stick their head in the sand and not have anything to do with it. That's one way that couples polarize. Another way is one person is a designated smarty pants. Let's say they have the finance degree, but at the end of the day, I have so many dear finance people who come to me because they didn't learn the emotional part of their relationship to money. So they know systems and tools, but they're not necessarily tracking their own bookkeeping or doing their own money maps, right? So one person gets designated as a smarty pantser on money who knows everything. The other person feels like the stupid one. I can go on and on. There are so many different examples of how couples polarize. every once in a while you get two people in cahoots with each other, like sitting in the back going, oh, we're not going to grow up. Like, we're creative artists or entrepreneurs. We're not going to have anything to do with this. And they're both on the same team, right? So that's just like to know that two people come together, you're going to have very different money stories. So step one for me is always the individual understanding their solo journey and understanding their money story. Right? That's number one. Then coming together, I've known couples who've been together 10, 20, 30 years, can talk about everything, have a great sexual life together, have great intimacy, have great communication skills. When it comes to money, they've never created a safe place to talk about money. So they still fight there. Or when they go to review the numbers, there's blaming or there's a horror at the different ways that we spend money. So even on the surface, if we have the same values, usually it's played out. Like my husband is really into expensive road bikes and I like my lotions and self-care, so he's kind of horrified by me. I'm teasing when I say horrified. We were until we really talked it through to understand why these values and the way we spend our money are so important. So for me, one of the first pieces for couples is to begin to create a safe place where you can talk about money. And that could be what I call money dates. And it could be over a glass of wine. It could be over a nice dinner. Step one is really just to have a place where you can do some storytelling. What did you learn from your family? All the things that I was talking about earlier. What did you learn from family? What was your role with your siblings? Were you the spender, like at age 6? Or were you, my brother was a little bank. He was saving money at age 5. That wasn't my experience. I was always like, ooh, I want to get that candy, or ooh, I want to buy that ring for my mom, or, there was always these beautiful things that I was interested in. So, step one is to create a safe place where you can talk about your money story. And it could be you each get 20 minutes or you each get 10 minutes and you just get to talk. And the other person is quiet and they're over there listening. And then you get your full 10 minutes. And then you stop and the other person gets 10 minutes. And it seems so simple. It's going back to basics, communication 101, with couples. But it's creating a safe place for couples, which most of us, again, this is not an area that we know how to do. So it's huge. This is step one, storytelling. Then after that's created and you're not fighting or you're not yelling at each other or not in the heat of the moment, some couples can have great conversations in bed. Right before bed, around money. And other people that you should not be having money conversations right before bed, right? So so money dates can be planned out. They can be spontaneous. But that's step one. Just creating a safe place, like candles. Make it sacred, right? Do whatever feels right for you. Step two is then starting to look at your numbers. Even before that, it's who's on what. Like, what tracking system are you using? You need one, You need a tracking system. So who's going to be the tracker for now? So, for example, I fell in love with Quicken and QuickBooks years ago and did it for years. And then what happened? I think I got pregnant. And all of a sudden, my Quicken stopped. And my husband said, I'm going to learn Mint and take it over. And I was like, okay, wonderful, like time for him to step in. And before that, he would write everything down on a piece of paper and add it all up. And whatever system works is great. But these days, there's YNAB and there's Mint and there's Quicken for personal finances. And then for business, there's Xero and there's QuickBooks. And I can go on and on about that. But with couples, step two is who's on what? Like who's going to be tracking? And maybe you want to switch roles. Right? And also, are you merging your accounts? Are you separating your accounts? I've had marriages saved 20 years in because the woman said it's time to separate our money accounts, our bank accounts, and it saved a marriage. Where I've had other people, they merged right away and later it worked. Or for me and my husband, we were separate for 7 years. Separate accounts, separate everything. We would add it all up and then realize that I owed him 100, he owed me 100. It was silly. Right? So then we actually merged our accounts. And that felt like a next level of intimacy. So there's no right path here. Should you merge your accounts? Should you separate your accounts? It's what's the right next step for intimacy. So who's on what? And then a third conversation can be, what are our values? And what are the different ways that we spend our money? And where are we horrified by the other ones? Where can we be playful here? Where can we understand? This is all about growing more intimacy. This is all about growing more compassion for each other. And so I could just keep going. These are some of the steps that we weren't taught, right? In Marriage 101, or we weren't taught when we were growing up. And so it's first doing this with ourselves. Then when we're brave enough and willing to do it with our honeys. And then, my God, if you decide to be entrepreneurs, then you need more money dates. Right? So money dates to review your data, review your numbers. And we just started touching on how scary it is for people. So if I can get folks across the bridge to even look at their numbers, peek at them, that's huge. And there are many things I do with folks, but that's one of them, is holding their hand across the bridge so they're willing and brave enough to just look at the numbers, right? And eventually become more neutral. But to learn from it, it's all a learning tool. Right? So learn a tracking system. I'm not saying you have to do bookkeeping forever. I did my own bookkeeping for 12 years and then finally passed it over to a bookkeeper. Do bookkeeping for 6 months. Learn it. And then pass it on. Or do it for a year. Right? So learn how to read your numbers. Get in there. So me and my husband have personal family dates to look at the numbers and to do visioning. I haven't even talked about visioning and money maps, right? And then we do that with a business as well. And that can happen monthly, it can happen quarterly, it can happen yearly. And there are so many important money conversations that need to happen about risk and how much are you going to invest in the money in the business, and are you going to bootstrap, or are we going to use savings, or are we going to use a credit card? 0% credit card? Are we going to, and on and on. So jump in at any point, because I can go on.
So I want to present with you a personal scenario that I would love your opinion on as a financial therapist. And it involves my former partner's commitments to an ex. And so I come from a Chinese background. So, the money story that comes with my lineage is, when two people come together and they're talking about life partnership, you're not only coming together it's not only a union in love, it's a union in resources. It's a union of two, people's financial wealth coming together to become one household. And so from the perspective of his commitments to his ex-wife, I felt that was a really important conversation to have, where if I were going to be the life partner, I really, my opinions and, consideration really needed to be like taken into account. So essentially, I'd love to, so the overall question is like, how do you navigate prior financial commitments? And so here is where the situation got very sticky for us. And essentially, it really, our relationship really broke down because we couldn't agree on how much financial support he needed to be continuing to give his ex-partner. So they got divorced years ago. We entered into a relationship with the intention of exploring life partnership. He had a marriage agreement already that he already fulfilled to her. So his marriage settlement was paid out. However, he was still financially supporting her, even though they didn't have children together, and even though she could legally work in the United States. And so when I requested as part of our union to come to get her to commit to a financial graduation plan, because I felt that the continued support was actually enabling her dependency. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to cut her a lump sum check. He wanted to continue making financial gifts to her family and to support her major life goals indefinitely, which felt to me rather awkward if I were the primary partner to keep seeing him give major gifts to her while he'd take me out to dinner. And what made things even more complicated was that she lived in the house that he owned and was distraught at the prospect of having to move out so that he could accommodate my need for privacy, even when he offered to pay her for a nice apartment for up to a year. So then I was presented with a mandate to willingly, joyfully, and lovingly cohabitate with his ex-wife if I wanted to stay in relationship with him. And not only his ex-wife, but her baby, not his baby, her baby, and her partner. And the group of them being for Tibetan refugees, so he was supporting all of them. even though they could all legally work, they could both legally work. And so my unwillingness to move in with this household, essentially, not community, but household, resulted in a great deal of disappointment on his end on how lacking in loving kindness and compassion I was to her. So, this was a very sticky scenario. And so I guess, one of the things that, I found utterly confusing was, as a partner, coming in with the expectation that I would be the primary partner and we're looking at a life partnership, at what point, does my opinion around prior financial agreements matter? And at what point is it none of my business? Yeah. And, is it at all normal or natural or, whatever, to have strong misgivings about the prospect of entering into a marriage with a partner, putting my resources into a relationship as an equal partner, but having to witness large continued outflows towards his ex-wife on his end, even though they do not have children together. So what would your take be on this scenario as a financial therapist? Because I know that many of us do enter into relationships where there were exes and maybe even children.
I mean, there's layers upon layers to what you're, and I can still feel it, I still feel it. I mean, on some level, I would love him to be here so I could ask him questions and understand from him more what were his agreements, what were his commitments, right? And you said he fulfilled all of that and then was still continuing to be a provider. So I just would need to hear so much more information of, what does being a provider for this woman mean? What does it mean to be a provider for, this small group, this small community? And how is he interpreting your requests and your needs and what you are asking for in order to move forward? Below the surface, this is all about trust. This is all about betrayal, that feeling betrayed. This is all about, can I fully trust this person? Can I become one with this person? What does that mean on all these different levels? You were starting to describe a polyamorous kind of household for me, and then that's not what you said, right? That's not...
It started to look very much like a polyamorous household where I was not the primary partner, but she actually was. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what I thought you were describing to me. Which is interesting because me and my husband have a monogamous relationship. And yet when it comes to business interactions, I tease him that he's like polyamor business, or however you say that. Like, he can't just have his hands in one pot under the umbrella of Art of Money. He keeps needing to like dabble in other things, right? So we're having conversations about how that feels and how I don't know how long he's going to stay under the umbrella. And I want him to stay, but I don't know how long he's going to stay. And I mean, these are just things that we have to continue to have conversations about and work out. Now, if you guys never got to a place where you felt honored, I still need to hear from him. Like, what does being a provider for this woman mean to him? And why is he continuing to do that even after he's honored that commitment? And why is he not able to fully turn towards you, right? And put everything into the same pot with you? So that, I honor, I hear that it's part of your lineage, your Chinese lineage, but it's also something that's how I see marriage, is two people coming together, putting their energy and resources together to really support each other, in the best way, to have a beautiful life and to create and to keep growing together, but to put it all together. I just would need to hear more from him, what that means. But I hear for you that it didn't get anywhere. It sounds like you kept saying, like, I need you to complete that, or maybe do a much smaller percentage of that so that we are fully together and move forward. And his response to you was, you're not being a loving, compassionate, giving person. Yeah. And then you never got anywhere further than that. Like, that's where you broke down, because you couldn't come together or compromise, each of you. Did he ever present to you like, let me just continue to give to them, but I'll really decrease the amount. And so 10% is going there and 90% is going to us. On some level, it's like he wasn't letting go.
He wasn't letting go, and he wasn't willing to commit to actual numbers. Yeah. Where my suggestion was, okay, you were going to help her complete school. So why don't we figure out how much she's going to need for her to complete this program and just have that be the finite amount, and then that's it. But he didn't really want to do that. There was this ongoing financial relationship that he wanted to continue to maintain, even though she now had a new partner, the father of her child, all of that, which is very confusing.
He was getting something out of it. He was really getting something out of it, whether he was conscious or unconscious, and he wasn't willing to name or be transparent about what that was. Your request to have numbers, totally valid. Totally valid. I would have wanted numbers as well. So he wasn't willing to, but that happens even in couples in a completely different scenario than you, where one person just says, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to have money dates with you. I'm not going to look at the numbers with you. I'm happy the way things are. And the other person, typically, I don't want to generalize like this, but for most part, the women are leading the way with the way that I teach money work. And maybe just because it's so feminine, but the women are leading the way. And then sometimes the couples, I get a lot of female couples, but when it's a woman and a man, sometimes they come together and they're on the same team. And I'm so happy because I feel when couples are on the same team, it's actually really rare and unusual, and we move mountains when we do this work together. But usually the woman starts to do the work on her own, and then hopefully eventually I see a lot of men peeking over their shoulder saying, what are you doing? Okay, I'm ready. Sometimes it's a year later, sometimes it's a few years later. I just think there needed to be a lot more conversations there. I'm not saying that you didn't exhaust it, but and maybe he wouldn't have gotten to that place, but what does that mean?
Yeah,
what is that
interesting? And I think it's a very common scenario where my need to have those difficult conversations started to be met by exacerbation on his end. And, accusations of me being the one creating drama around it. So, of course, if I didn't have those conversations, there would be no drama. So I was the one causing drama. And I can imagine that in many scenarios, you have two partners where one partner, like as you mentioned, doesn't want to have that conversation and starts blaming the other partner for wanting to have those conversations. What do you do in those situations? Because I imagine it's very, very common if you don't have two partners that are on the same page or even willing to have those difficult discussions. How do you address that, Bari?
Well, ideally, my favorite is when I get couples who show up and they're both willing. Right?
Right. Uh-huh.
That's my favorite. And I only work with, 5 to 15 private clients at a time, and they're usually women, and then I get a handful of couples, right? And my couples right now mostly are willing. But, one asked me for an algorithm about budgeting. And I was like, that's not how it works. And she's over there saying, I need to work through the emotional stuff. And so it's going at a much slower pace for him, but he's hanging in there. How do we have these conversations? We just have to... That's when I may send them to a therapist, a traditional therapist, to work through some of that. Because at this point, I want to work with more willing folks, right? Or they take my year-long program and the woman begins. And it happens, as I was saying a lot, her partner is not ready or willing and just simply says, I'm not doing this with you. I'm not. And the woman goes forth and she starts doing her own money work. And I've had everything from a couple split up, and then she started doing her own money work. She started learning about her behavior. She started working on her emotions. She started learning a tracking system and looking at her numbers for the first time ever and realizing she was playing a lot of games with her husband. And then she came back a year later and they came back together simply because of the amazing, incredible work that she did. Obviously, he must have changed as well. So, what do I do with a couple when one person, let's say one person is not willing? If they're going to sign up for couples financial therapy, they have to show up. They have to show up. They have to, every 2 weeks we meet for 6 months. And there's homework in between and money dates in between. And sometimes they do the money date the night before. right? And so it's continually coming together and saying, this is important to this person. This is important to this person. Let's talk about the emotions for a while, and then let's address the numbers. And we would just go back and forth until eventually we saw that both of these places are important. They're equally as important, and they need their space. It's not just practical. It's not just emotional. It's emotional. It's practical. It's psychological and spiritual. And that's what I believe. And that's what I see. So I'm going to be, guiding folks to that over and over and over and showing them all sides of this aspect. Right? So, some of my financial folks, really, they know the systems, but they still have so many emotions. They need to learn that part. So we all need different ingredients that we need to add. So with my couples, I'm just, continually, as I'm saying, teaching them how to have a safe place to talk about money. And I've had couples that begin my 6-month financial therapy and all they do is fight. It's all tension and fighting, and the money dates and conversations are very uncomfortable and very hard. And by the end, they actually become pleasurable. They become fun. They actually really deepen, but it takes time. My God. My husband, we did a blog post about a spontaneous money date that we had on a Saturday night while our child was watching How to Train Your Dragon, which is a great kids movie. And I could feel the money date coming. It was almost a quarter had come, and I could feel we were needing one of those big ones. Because we're going into a launch, and I could feel we needed to look at the numbers and we needed to sit down, and we said this is not for the faint of heart, and this is also not a beginning money date. A beginning money date is literally just having time to start storytelling. Years later, now we can spontaneously have a money date, and my husband called me over and said, okay, let's look at the numbers. And I immediately was like, oh, we're having a money date. Let me light the candle. Let me spritz some essential oils. He was like, do you need
some calming lavender?
He was like, yeah, do you need some glitter, chocolate? What do you need? I was like, okay, no, I'm good. We wound up having a whole hour-long money date, reviewing the numbers, what's working, what's not, patterns, where are we at, where are we going? And it turned out to be more of a sobering money date because we're just about to go into a big launch again, and we have a year-long cycle. So we make most of our money in one big launch for the year, right? Instead of every month or every few months. And I love that, right? So just to say that some money dates down the road, they become fun and they become really meaningful, and you get on the same team, but they're not all like that. This one was more sobering, but at the end of it, then we still celebrated what we're doing well. What's different? What's grown, right? Because we tend to always focus on the negative around money. So I'm a big celebrator of all the teeny little baby steps. So couples, it's getting you to have a safe place to talk about money, your strengths, your challenges. No one knows how to do it all. No one's the main smarty pants. That's just not true. It's not true. We all have something to bring to the money conversation, because it's really about creating an incredible livelihood and having a good life and living by your values. And that's really what money work is all about for me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed hearing that. And thank you for your take on how to approach that very difficult and challenging personal scenario that I had confronted. I'd always wondered if there was another way that I could have handled it, but I think at the end of the day, our needs were not really aligned. And so, for that reason, since we wanted very different things, especially around that continued relationship with the ex-wife and her family and how much I would have been required to also be in relationship with them, we ended up going our separate ways. But the advice that you did share with us this evening is very sage advice for couples that are having to really address these difficult questions, especially if one or both parties are entrepreneurs. So thank you so much, Bari, for sharing with us your wisdom and your methodology. How can we best stay in touch with you?
So come on over to my site at baritessler.com, and it's BARITESSLER. And I have an incredible little mini Art of Money course It's a 7-day little money course when you join our list and join our community, and incredible blog articles that I'm very proud of, and a whole money memoirs series where people are sharing money stories. Lots of entrepreneurs sharing money stories. It's just come over to my site and enjoy.
Fantastic. And you mentioned you do your an annual launch for your Art of Money program. When is that happening, and how do we find out more about this?
Yeah, so if you join my community list, it's coming. So November is our pre-launch, and I usually like to call it an opening. That feels better to me than launch, right? So in November for 2 weeks, we're going to have a pre-opening for all the folks that are raring to go. And there's really sweet stuff that happens if you join in November, like a holiday money care package and a tele-ritual. And because usually when we go into holidays, we get a little nutso around money, and our energy just speeds up, and some of our addictive patterns like increase, and we kind of check out of our body. So there's a lot of supportive things that happen. And then it officially begins in January. So in January, there's going to be a big launch, and we're going to be in an RV, my little family, traveling from Seattle down to Santa Cruz, interviewing some of our dear folks in our community. I mean, 2014, we had almost 400 folks in the Art of Money year-long program in 17 countries. And our goal for next year is 500 in more countries. And so we're going to be interviewing folks from the road in an RV, some of our community that have taken the Art of Money, and some of our guest teachers. And I'm so excited about that. So I'll be launching.
Really exciting. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it myself.
Thank you.
All right.
So November and January is when it's all happening.
Keep it on the radar. All right, folks. Thank you so much, Bari, for your time. You have a beautiful evening.
So, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, folks, for listening to the Entrepreneurs for a Change podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us reach more people with inspiring stories like this one by giving us a 5-star rating in iTunes. If this podcast inspires you to join the movement of change-making entrepreneurs, we'd love to give you a jumpstart with our free Business Changemakers Toolkit, which you can download at www.entrepreneursforachange.com/join. If you have a change maker in mind you'd love for us to interview, go to entrepreneursforachange.com/suggest and tell us who and why. Finally, feel free to stop by facebook.com/entrepreneursforachange to share your thoughts and say hello.